Hey everyone, in today's video, we've got something I've never seen before or didn't even know existed. A Kenwood model KR-44. Most of the Kenwood stereo receivers I'm familiar with have 4 digits after the KR, but this one only has 2. And based on the looks of it, it looks like this thing is from the early 70s. So it's pretty dang old. Not many of them around, I don't think, since I've, never seen one before. I have no idea any history on it. Do not know if it works, have not plugged it in yet. So I think the best thing to do right now is to get a close look at this thing, get to know its controls, take a look at the back, and see if we can hook this up to the dim bulb and see if we get smoke, sparks, something. I don't know. Let's go for it. So here it is, the KR-44, right there, Kenwood. And looks like we've got a greenish back display. I like this fake wood right here. It's kind of a nice touch there. It's the only wood vinyl veneer on the entire thing. Normally the case of it is got some of it, but this one does not. So we've got volume, loudness, a filter, bass, treble, tape monitor, stereo mode, selector, and output. So very basic, very simple receiver. Let's take a look at the back. It's in nice dusty condition. And what do we have back here? Oh, this is laid out quite nicely. Everything's nice and far apart. So your antenna hookup is right there. Looks like right in here we've got our inputs and tape recorder output also. Down here we've got main in, pre-out. So I think we're going to want these plugged in for what we're about to do. And then over here we've got speakers and a mono out, which is something I've never seen before. Let's take the cover off. Make sure there's no like exploded components or anything. Okay, cover's coming off. What do we have inside? We've got ourselves a nice dusty capacitor coupled stereo receiver. So one way you can always tell if it's capacitor coupled versus DC coupled is if you look at this amp board, you see 2 big capacitors right there for the right and left channel, and then you've got one large one over here that's going to be for your positive DC rail for this thing to work. Looks like we've got some tuner boards up here. This looks like a phono preamp maybe, and underneath I'm sure we'll find the preamplifier attached to these controls or something. And then we've got our nice big ass pulley for the tuning cap. Cute little transformer. I say we turn this thing on and see what we've got. And we're not going to have to check for DC offset because, well, it's capacitor coupled. Let's get this thing on the dim bulb. I'll turn this off in case we get some light and you can actually see the dim bulb. And now let's turn it on. No light on the dim bulb. We're not going to get a relay click, so we're drawing like very little current. But check this out. We've got a little display here. Looks like 1 or 2 bulbs is burnt out. We'll have to see how that's set up and get a replacement. So we've got it set to the A speakers here. We're in FM auto. And as I move this thing, I see the tuning knob move also. Or meter, sorry. Let's take our handy piece of wire and hook it up to the antenna. Let's see if we can get an FM stereo light as we play around with this. So you can see as I turn this, we get a very strong signal in FM. So the radio is picking things up, but no FM stereo lamp. So that's either burnt out or FM stereo is not working. Let's check the A speakers for anything really bad, real quick. Nothing bad. So we might as well turn the volume down, hook up a speaker, and see what we get out of this thing. Okay, so I've got both A and B speakers hooked up. Scary. Okay, so we got Ozzy Osbourne and jeez, That's up there as one of the worst volume knobs I've ever heard. Okay, so it's wanting to work. We're not going to get much further with this thing until we get some deoxit on that volume control, because this is really bad. Folks, I figured out why we weren't getting stereo. It's because I didn't hit the stereo switch. So there. Now FM stereo's working. Alright, we gotta get to these controls. We gotta get some deoxit on these things ASAP. How do we get there? Take a look around. Pretty clean under here. Got some big ol' axial electrolytics. I'll probably check those, make sure they're not in terrible shape. But right here is where we want to go. This is the volume knob, and we can see it's positioned very nicely. So we can get our little deoxit F5 straw right in there with relative ease. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to take this and, you know, squirt it like so, one-handed, watching through the camera instead of watching what I'm actually doing. And I'll exercise that and see how it feels. Oh yeah, this already feels way more free than it used to. Heck, I'm feeling adventurous. Let's just go right back to what we were doing earlier and see if it works better. Yeah, it's already actually listenable. FM is quite distorted though. Everything's very distorted in FM. That distortion might be because we are on the dim bulb, so let's take it off since I didn't see a bright bulb. Let's see if we get better sound that way. So the FM definitely needs some work. Let's switch it to aux and see if we have that same distortion coming through in aux. We absolutely do. So this thing's in a lot of trouble. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to isolate the preamp, because for some reason this receiver allows you to do that. So we're going to take the jacks out of the main in back here like we saw, and I've got the speakers turned off right now. We're going to run the phone straight into the main power amplifier. So there's sound out of both channels now, and it's very distorted. This thing is super messed up. Lots of distortion happening, and the fact that it's happening in both channels would lead me to believe that it might be a power supply issue. So I think the next course of action with this thing is to take a look at the schematic, see if there's any voltages published on the power supply, and go from there, see if we can get confirmation that any of the power supply is working. So I got a new blanket for Christmas to stay warm down here because the basement gets kind of chilly. But really what it's turned into is a new blanket for these two. So yeah, I guess I'll just continue to freeze down here. I'll be alright. Let's go back to the stereos. Aha. There she is. Oh, don't mind me. A lot of you asked what I was drinking in the 2226 video. It was not Blue Moon. It was a hazy IPA from a local place around here called New Trail. Alright, let's get the schematic on the screen here. There is no power supply board on this receiver. That's how cheap this thing is. The power supply is kind of down here, I think. All that stuff looks very power supply to me. I've got the schematic in a place where I can see it. First of all, let's check our transformer, make sure we've got the 36 volts coming off of the thing at the red wires. So that looks like this one right here. Great, and this one right here. Great, we have that. That's exactly what we want. Now, looks like we're going to be wanting 46 volts off of the diodes. It looks like we've got some little tiny capacitors in series with them. So, do we have 46 volts? No, we're DC. Do we have 46 volts here? 49, great. And then over here, 49. Okay, so we are getting rectified DC. Okay, so I found Q1. It's buried right in here. If we check the base, we're supposed to have, it's not marked, but I see a 16 volt capacitor near the base, so that should be, it should be less than 16 volts, and it's 13.7, so that's good. Let's check out the emitter. The emitter is supposed to be 14 volts, and I see 13.22, so that's like close enough for what we're doing here. And the collector is at 30 volts when it's supposed to be 28, so a little bit higher, but you know, we're looking for plus minus 3 volts. Like if we saw a negative voltage on any one of those, that'd be a sign that something's very wrong in here, but it looks like everything's okay so far. It looks like we've got all the right voltages going to the power amplifier, so that means the issue is probably in the power amplifier. You know what? I never checked the preamp. I never isolated the preamp. Let's do that with an old friend. So we all know this Marantz 2226 works. What I've done here is I have the preamp of the Kenwood going out into the Marantz. So I'm going to put on everybody's favorite song. We're going to see if this thing sends a signal to the Marantz. We need to plug it in first. Okay. That's a great sign. So what I've just demonstrated here is the preamplifier is working. Nothing wrong at all. And yeah, here's proof. You see, this doesn't work, but that does. Because we are going through the Kenwood as the preamp straight into the Marantz power amp. So I did some testing off camera, like I do. Went down a silly path. Didn't even bother checking the outputs first. So I did that, and I'll show you what I found. I found that the ones on the outside of the heatsink, they both tested good. And I'll show you that right here. Here's one good one. But here's what I found on the middle too. What I want to show you is this right here. Look at that. No component detected. That is so bizarre. I've never seen that before with an output, because like normally when these things go, it's you know, they short or something. So I just thought that was really weird. So now the logical thing is to take the two working outputs, put them in the receiver, and see if we get one working channel that's not distorted like crazy. So that's what I'm about to do right now. Okay. Yep, it's fixed. So that's kind of crazy. All it was bad outputs. Maybe something is out of balance in here. We'll figure that out later as we walk through this. Yeah, that sounds great. Folks, it has been an absolute trip with this thing. I have so many hours into this off camera. I stopped recording because I was just at a point where I had no idea what to do next, and I don't really like recording myself doing that. So I'll summarize for you. Long story short, I replaced the outputs in the one channel with the two working ones, and yeah, it worked. And I'll show you that. Turn it on. And you know, we get radio static, works. But if we turn the volume up, and here's what happened next. See that? It just cuts in and out like crazy. The louder you go, it's only stable at this lower volume. And the other thing I noticed was, if I touch these outputs, they're like hot. They're really hot. Okay, not really hot, I didn't like burn myself, but if I left it on long enough, like, it'd probably hurt if I touched them. So I thought, okay, hot outputs, bad bias. How do you adjust the bias? Well, if you look at the schematic of this thing, and I think I'll put it on the screen, the bias is controlled by a thermistor. And that's not really a good idea for controlling bias because, you know, if the temperature of the room changes, your bias changes, and, you know, they'll pick up the temperature inside of here, I guess, but it's just, in general, it's just not good amp design. But, you know, this is a budget amp. It's probably the least expensive one that they offered, and it was very early solid state, so all this was in its infancy. I'm not going to fault them for it, per se, but it's something we're dealing with here. So here we are. These little blue guys right here are the thermistors for each side. You can also see I've recapped the entire amplifier board because I just wanted to rule out any of that stuff, and, like, you know, here's some of the caps. I can tell you, some of these were literally double what they were rated for. They were pretty bad, pretty leaky. So we've got all new caps on here, except for the coupling capacitors, because those tested excellent, actually. Those are actually in really good shape, so I left them there. I also can't find a service manual for this thing. I'm going off of only the schematic and taking my best guess at everything on the schematic and just trying to figure out what is everything doing here. So since I don't have a service manual, I had to figure out how you read the bias on this thing. So I know another capacitor coupled amplifier, and that is the Marantz 2230. Everyone loves the Marantz 2230, and the service manual is readily available, and it's got, you know, stuff explaining how it works. So I looked to see how you measure the bias on that receiver. So here is the Marantz 2230, and it says in order to set the bias, you want to measure across R774 and adjust R765. So R774 is right here, and we see there's your output. The collector of this output has rail voltage going to it, and then this is coming off of the emitter, and then this is going to signal out. This is going to go straight to your coupling capacitor. So keep that in mind. Let's take a look at the KR-44. We're only going to look at the top half of this because this is one channel. So there's our output that has rail voltage coming in. Then the emitter of this is R25 right there. So then that goes out to the coupling capacitor right there. So if you measure across this resistor, you do indeed get the bias. And I think you're supposed to be able to adjust the bias with VR3 right here because there's your thermistor. So believe it or not, I have the multimeter hooked up to R25. I'm going to turn this thing on and we're going to watch the bias. That is supposed to be like 5 millivolts. You know, that's way too high, and that's why those transistors are getting so hot. So I'm going to turn that off so we don't blow our other outputs, because we kind of need them. They're TO66s. They're rare. So I thought to myself, okay, what if we remove that thermistor? What if we just get rid of our problems by removing that thermistor? So it's out. Let's try it again. Holy moly, it's even higher. Not even gonna let that go because I might blow the outputs. I don't want that. So then I thought, okay, what if you just add a 180 ohm resistor? Because this is just kind of what I had laying around. This measures at like 500 or 300 something, I don't know. It's tough to tell what that's supposed to be because, you know, it depends on temperature. So let's just load up this resistor real quick and I'll show you what happens. We'll turn it on and we see that we get, you know, something better, something a little more stable, but it's still way too high. So what if we shorted that resistor out completely. So I'm just going to take this jumper and I'm going to put it against those nice long leads on that resistor. And what happens? Bias goes to 1 millivolt. And it still works. We get static, but it behaves the exact same way. What's going on here? Why is it behaving the exact same way? Well, after some fiddling around and troubleshooting, I discovered something. This was just a what if it's like this thought that I had, and it turned out to be correct, actually. So, you know what I'm doing right now? I'm installing the new pair of TO66 output transistors that I bought on eBay to replace the blown ones. That's what I'm doing right now. So everything you just heard before, there was only 2 outputs in for 1 channel. I didn't think that would affect things. But now the 2 are in. Watch this. Okay, works. Stable. Suddenly it's stable. So at this point, I'm just wondering what the heck to do about this dumb little thermistor. Because the same thing is happening on the other side. You know, these new outputs, they run very hot. Ouch. And it's probably because of that other thermistor that's in there. So, do I just replace this with a resistor? That seems kind of sketch. Seems kind of inappropriate. But let's try something lower than 180. I think I've got... What do I have over here? I have a 3.32 ohm, half watt, 1% tolerance resistor. Let's try one of these on each side and just see what the heck happens. Okay, 3.32 in there. Let's see what happens with the bias. So at idle we've got basically nothing, but you know, it's working. I don't know if the bias is supposed to be a little more tame when you have a load going through it. I'm not exactly sure, but you know, something this dinky and simple, like, I'm like not that worried in a lot of ways. So I guess really the next thing to do here is get this thing on the oscilloscope, look at the waveform, and see what's really happening here. So I think I'll do that right now. Okay, so I've got the scope set up. We're going to set it to aux, and we're going to get 1000 hertz going right through here. The sound is on, and there's our signal, which is exactly what we want to see. So again, we're reading across an 8 ohm load in the back, and this is the right channel. And we're going to see when we see clipping. What's the voltage at which we see clipping? How about we do our power test off of the dim bulb? Maybe that'll give us better results. So if we want this amp performing how it's advertised, if you type 10 volts into the Ohm's Law calculator, you get 12.5 watts. So we are clipping down here, and that's not great. So we're not like terribly far off, honestly. This isn't the worst thing in the world. It's running way cooler than it was. You know, if I touch these, they're not burning me, they're just warm. And I haven't even applied fresh thermal compound yet, so that's going to be making them warm also. With the amount of time this thing has already taken me and the amount of parts I've put into it, I might as well just call this one good because, you know, the bias is stable-ish now. The resistors I put in for the bias do not get super hot. So you know what? Let's just play everyone's favorite song and call this one good. Are you ready? There it is. Sounds like I gotta clean that treble control one more time. So there it is. This was not working when we got it, and now it is. Even though I used a questionable technique for that thermistor, I'd love to hear your input on that. I don't really know what to do about that, but you know, seems to be working just fine now. It's got a recapped power amplifier. I recapped the power supply also because I had half the parts laying around, so I just threw them in there, and those caps also, like the ones on the power amp board, half of them measured at double what they were supposed to be, so needed to happen. Everything critical per se on this is taken care of, I suppose. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something, and please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of stuff because there's plenty more coming. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.